A few days later, Claire came by again. She found me sitting at the dining table, staring at the photo. She asked softly, "You okay, Mags?" I nodded. "Yes, just thinking," she smiled sadly. "About him?" "Always," I said. Then she said something that stuck with me. "You know, sometimes love means letting go before they even realize you did." I didn't understand it then, but later, I did. One Sunday morning, out of habit, I woke early, made coffee, and started cleaning. When I walked past Daniel's old room, I paused. The door was still closed. It had been for months. I slowly opened it. Everything was the same. The posters, the books, the smell of his old cologne faint in the air. But this time, I didn't cry. I walked to the desk, picked up one of his old notebooks, and flipped through it. There were doodles, random lyrics, plans for things he never did. And then I found a note written in his teenage handwriting. "Mom, one day I'll buy you a big house by the beach." I smiled. Not because I believed it would happen, but because I finally understood. Promises made in love are never lies. They're just time-sensitive. It was autumn when I decided to stop waiting entirely. No more counting months, no more expecting visits. I started taking evening walks, joining a small reading club, volunteering at the library. I began to build a life again, a quiet one, but mine. Then, one chilly evening, as I returned from the library, I noticed my phone had 3 missed calls. All from Daniel. My heart jumped. I called back immediately. He answered, his voice rushed but warm. "Mom, finally. I was starting to think you blocked me." I laughed softly. "Of course not. How are you?" Good. Listen, I've been thinking. I might come visit next month." There it was again. "Next month?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "That would be lovely," he said. "Yeah, I just need to sort some work stuff first. I'll let you know the date." We talked for a few more minutes. Light, surface level, polite. Then he said, "Love you, Mom." "Love you too, sweetheart." When I hung up, I didn't feel the same rush of hope I used to. Instead, I felt calm, peaceful even, like I finally understood what those words really meant. Love doesn't always arrive when you want it to. Next month came and went. No visit, no call. But I wasn't broken this time. I spent that weekend painting the kitchen instead, a soft yellow, warm and bright. It felt like letting sunlight back in. While cleaning afterward, I found that photo he'd sent, the one from the mountain. I hung it in the hallway, right by the front door. Every time I walked past it, I smiled. Because even though he wasn't home, a part of him still lived in this house, in every corner, every memory, every promise that time couldn't erase. Winter came again, soft and quiet, like an old friend who knows how to knock without making a sound. Snow covered the streets, the trees, even the old mailbox that still had Daniel's name faintly scratched on the side. Life had slowed into a steady rhythm. I'd wake up early, make coffee, sit by the window with a blanket, and watch the world outside move on. It wasn't sadness anymore, just stillness. There's a difference, you know. Sadness feels heavy, but stillness feels like understanding. That year, I started keeping a small journal. Every night, I'd write one good thing about the day, even if it was something small. Had a nice cup of tea. Saw a child wave at me. The sunset looked like gold. It was my way of reminding myself that joy doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. Sometimes I'd write about Daniel. Not in a bitter way, just memories. Like how he used to sing off-key in the shower, or how he'd come home from school and throw his bag on the couch and yell, "Mom, what's for dinner?" I'd smile as I wrote, because those moments were mine to keep, even if he wasn't here to relive them. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't from him. It was from the local community center. They were looking for volunteers to read to children on weekends. I hesitated at first. I hadn't worked with kids in years, but something inside me said, "Go." So I did. That Saturday, I walked into a small room filled with tiny chairs, crayons, and the smell of glue and paper. A little girl with freckles looked up at me and said, "Are you the story lady?" I smiled. "I suppose I am." And just like that, something inside me woke up again. Week after week, I went back. I read stories about dragons and fairies, lost puppies and brave little girls. The children would listen wide-eyed, their laughter filling the room. When I left each day, I felt lighter. It was strange. I had spent so long missing one voice. I forgot how many others were still willing to listen. One evening, after a long day at the center, I came home and checked my voicemail. There it was, his voice. "Hey, Mom. I know it's been a while. I was thinking about coming by next weekend, if that's okay." For a moment, I just stood there frozen. Then I sat down slowly and replayed it. Once, twice, 3 times. He sounded different, older, maybe tired, but genuine. It had been nearly 3 years since I'd last seen him in person. I looked around my house. The walls were painted, the plants were alive, the air smelled of cinnamon and home. For the first time, I realized I didn't need him to come, but I wanted him to. Not because of the promise, but because love had turned into peace, and peace was ready to open the door again. That weekend, I cleaned, but not obsessively. I baked cookies, but didn't fuss over how perfect they looked. And when the day came, I didn't wait by the window. I just lived my morning, coffee, music, calm. Then, around noon, I heard a car pull up. The doorbell rang once. My heart skipped, but this time I smiled before opening it. He stood there, looking a little nervous, holding a small potted plant in his hands. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. I looked at him for a second. His eyes, his posture, his smile. He was the same boy who used to run down this hallway barefoot, just taller and more grown. I said, "Come in, Daniel." He stepped inside, glancing around. "Everything looks different." "Everything changes eventually," I replied. He nodded, setting the plant on the counter. I'm sorry it took so long," I smiled faintly. "You're here now. That's what matters." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he used to do his homework. For a while, neither of us said much. Then he sighed and said quietly, "I don't know how I let it get this far. I kept meaning to call, to visit. I just got caught up in things." I reached across the table and held his hand. "Life happens, sweetheart. The important part is that you remembered where home is." He looked down, his eyes glistening. "I never stopped thinking about you, Mom. I just didn't know how to come back." I squeezed his hand gently. "Then don't think about the time you lost. Think about the time we have left." We spent the afternoon talking about his job, his friends, his travels. He showed me pictures, told me stories. I laughed more that day than I had in months. When he left in the evening, he hugged me tight and said, "I'll visit again soon." "Not a promise, a plan," I chuckled softly. "I'll hold you to that." As he drove away, I watched from the porch. Not with tears this time, but with gratitude, because I finally understood. Love doesn't vanish with distance. It just waits quietly until it's called again. That night, I wrote in my journal, "He came home today." Not because I asked, but because I stopped asking. And somehow, that made all the difference. A few weeks passed after Daniel's visit. He called a couple of times, short conversations, easy and light. I didn't count the days between calls anymore. I didn't need to. Something inside me had changed. I no longer measured love by presence, but by connection. That quiet, invisible thread that never truly breaks, no matter how thin it gets. One Sunday morning, I was sitting by the window, watching the sunlight filter through the curtains. The potted plant he brought me sat on the table beside my chair, a small green sprout reaching for the light. I smiled at it and whispered, "You're doing well." Maybe I was talking to myself too. In the months that followed, I found a rhythm that felt whole again. Mornings with tea and quiet music, afternoons reading stories to children at the center, evenings writing in my journal, not about what I'd lost, but what I'd learned. There's a peace that comes when you stop waiting for people to fill your emptiness and start filling it yourself. I didn't know that kind of peace before. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at the old photo on the wall, the one of Daniel and me at the beach when he was 10. He's holding a seashell up to his ear, grinning. I'm laughing beside him, my hair a mess from the wind. It's funny how memories stay so vivid long after moments fade. I don't cry when I see that picture anymore. I just whisper, "We did okay, didn't we?" One evening, I got a letter in the mail. Real paper, real handwriting. It was from Daniel. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot lately. I'm sorry for the years I disappeared. I guess I thought growing up meant doing everything on my own. But every time something good happens, you're still the first person I want to tell. I know I can't get back the time I lost, but I hope I can start being part of your life again. Love, Dan." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in my journal. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because sometimes love doesn't need an apology. It just needs a home to return to. When my son told me he was moving out of state, I tried my best to smile. He hugged me tightly, said, "Mom, it's not like I'm disappearing. I'll visit every month." Every month. Those 2 words sounded so light then, like air. But now, they echo in my house like a whisper I can't silence. I still remember that morning. He was standing in the kitchen, coffee mug in one hand, keys in the other. The sunlight was spilling through the window, hitting the counter where he used to do his homework when he was 12. I had made him pancakes, like I always did before something big. He laughed and said, "Mom, you don't have to treat me like a kid." I smiled and replied, "You'll always be my kid, even when you're 80. He rolled his eyes but kissed me on the forehead before walking out. That's the last time the house felt full. The first month, he really did visit. He came home one Sunday afternoon, flowers in hand, a bit tired but cheerful. We made dinner together, pasta, his favorite. And he told me all about his new job, his apartment, his plans. I listened like I always did, proud and nervous at the same time. When he left that night, he said again, "I'll see you next month, okay?" I nodded, not knowing how much I'd hold on to that sentence. The second month, he called instead. "Hey Mom, things got a little busy at work. I'll come next weekend." "Of course," I said. I spent that weekend cleaning his room, washing his old sheets, making sure the house smelled like the cinnamon candles he used to love. But he didn't come. He texted late Sunday night, "Sorry, Mom. Something came up. Next month, promise." I looked at that message a few times before putting my phone down. I wasn't angry, just quiet. By the 3rd month, I realized I had started talking to his old sweater hanging behind the door. It sounds silly when I say it out loud, but when you live alone for too long, silence becomes heavier than sound. Sometimes I'd make 2 cups of tea by habit, one for me, one for him, and when the second one got cold, I'd pour it down the sink, pretending it didn't hurt. You know, nobody ever warns you about the loneliness that comes after raising a child. People talk about the sleepless nights, the tantrums, the teenage arguments, but not the silence that follows once they've grown. It's like you spend decades building a home full of laughter and noise, only to watch it slowly empty itself. One box, one suitcase, one promise at a time. I never blamed him. He was young, ambitious, chasing a life he'd dreamed of. That's what I raised him for. Independence, courage, self-reliance. But part of me wished he'd understand that even the strongest mothers need to be remembered sometimes. I kept his room just the way it was. Unmade bed, posters on the wall, old trophies on the shelf. Sometimes when I vacuumed, I'd skip that room altogether. I didn't want to disturb the memories. I'd sit there in the evenings, just tracing the lines on the wooden desk with my fingers. There were still faint marks from when he carved his initials as a teenager. Deepasem, Daniel and Mom. He said he'd never move out. Funny how easily we say things when we're young. One afternoon, about 6 months after he left, I decided to visit him instead. I packed a small suitcase, baked some cookies, and drove the 2 hours to his city. When I reached his building, I called him. He sounded surprised. "Mom, you're here? Oh, I wish you'd told me. I'm actually at work right now." "That's okay," I said softly. "I'll wait." But when I got to his door, it was locked, of course. So I sat on the steps in the hallway, the cookie box on my lap, listening to the hum of other people's lives behind their doors. I must have sat there for almost an hour before realizing how silly I looked, An old woman waiting outside her son's apartment with cookies. I left the box by the door with a note. Love you always. Mom. He called that night, apologetic. Mom, you didn't have to do that. I know, I said. But truth is I had to. Because waiting was all I knew how to do. Part 2, the distance that grew. Setup plus rising conflict. It's strange how time moves differently when you're alone. Days blur together. You find comfort in small things. The kettle whistling, the mail arriving, the neighbor's dog barking every morning. They become your rhythm, your proof that life still exists around you. Every now and then, I'd get a message from him, a photo from his trip, a happy birthday, Mom, sometimes just a thumbs up emoji. And I'd reply with a paragraph because I didn't know how to talk in short bursts. One time I wrote, Do you remember how we used to watch the rain together? You'd always say thunder sounded like God moving furniture. He replied, Haha, yeah. Miss you too, Mom. That too kept me going for weeks. Around the second year, I noticed something new. He stopped calling first. It was always me reaching out, asking if he was eating well, sleeping enough, taking breaks. Sometimes I'd wait until Sunday evening, pretending I wasn't waiting. When the phone didn't ring, I'd tell myself, he must be busy. Busy. That word became my rival. It took him away from me in slow motion, not suddenly, but in little pieces. Then came the holidays. Christmas used to be our favorite time. He'd help me decorate the tree, put the star on top, then sneak extra marshmallows into the cocoa. That year, he didn't come. He called on Christmas morning. Mom, I'm so sorry. Flights got too expensive, I said. That's all right, dear. But when I hung up, I looked at the 2 stockings by the fireplace. One with his name, one with mine, and for the first time I considered taking his down. But I couldn't. Because taking it down would mean accepting that the promise was broken. Sometimes neighbors would stop by and ask, How's Daniel doing? And I'd smile, Oh, he's doing great, busy as always. They'd nod, and I'd quickly change the subject. I didn't want pity. I didn't want anyone to know that my son, my everything, had become a stranger who lived 2 hours away, but felt like another world. At night, when the wind rattled the windows, I'd talk to myself softly, pretending I was talking to him. Do you still remember this house? Do you still remember me? I never expected an answer, but sometimes the silence felt like a no. It was around his 32nd birthday when I realized I didn't know what his favorite meal was anymore. That thought broke me in a way I didn't expect. When he was little, he'd always ask for spaghetti and meatballs. Then, during his college years, it was all about sushi and smoothies. But now, I didn't know. I didn't even know what kind of cake he liked. So that year, I mailed him a card. Just a simple birthday card with a short note inside. I'm proud of the man you've become. Love you always. I waited the whole day, checking my phone every few minutes. He didn't reply. 3 days later, I got a text. Hey Mom, got your card. Thanks. Sorry I've been swamped. Swamped. Another word that meant I forgot. That night I sat by the kitchen window and just stared outside. The world felt so big and I felt so small in it. I could see the reflection of my own face in the glass, older than I remembered, eyes a little tired. I whispered, You said every month. The words hung in the air like smoke. A few weeks later, I saw a picture on social media. It was Daniel, smiling at a dinner table with friends. Candles, cake, laughter. The caption said, Best birthday yet. I froze for a moment, my heart sinking like a stone. I wasn't there. He didn't even tell me. I stared at that picture for a long time, memorizing the joy on his face. He looked happy, and maybe that's what hurt the most, knowing he could be that happy without me. I closed my laptop, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in silence. There were no tears that night, just a quiet, heavy acceptance. Days turned into weeks again. I stopped calling as much. I told myself, let him live, let him grow. Don't be the mother who clings, but sometimes the loneliness was too loud to ignore. I'd walk through the grocery store, see something he used to like. Peanut butter, caramel pudding, cinnamon rolls, and find myself buying it out of habit. Then it would sit untouched in the cupboard until it expired. That spring, I got sick. Nothing too serious, just a bad flu that lingered for weeks. My neighbor Claire was kind enough to bring soup and check in on me. One evening, she said gently, "Did you tell your son?" I shook my head. She frowned. "You should. He'd want to know." I smiled weakly. "I don't want to bother him. He's busy." That night, as I lay in bed coughing, I stared at my phone. I typed a message. "Hey, sweetheart. Haven't been feeling well lately. Just resting a bit." Then I deleted it. I didn't want to sound needy. That's the thing about mothers. Even when we're hurting, we protect our children from our sadness. By summer, I felt better physically, but something inside me had shifted. I stopped waiting by the window on weekends. I stopped checking the calendar for next month. And I stopped setting 2 plates at dinner. The house had accepted his absence before I did. Then, one rainy evening, something unexpected happened. I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped. For a brief second, I thought, maybe it's him, but it wasn't. It was the mailman, drenched in rain, holding a package. "Delivery for Margaret Evans." That's me. I signed for it, thanked him, and brought it inside. The label said it was from Daniel. My hands trembled a little as I opened it. Inside was a photo frame, a picture of him standing on a mountain, smiling at the camera. There was a short note tucked behind it. "Thought you'd like this one, Mom. Hope you're doing okay." Just that. "No, I miss you. No, I'll visit soon. Just hope you're okay." I held that picture for a long time. He looked happy, healthy, alive. But in that same moment, I realized he was living a life that no longer had a space for me. That night I wrote, "Time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you what truly matters." And I think that's the lesson I'd waited 3 years to learn. The next morning, I went for a walk. It was cool, quiet, and the world smelled like rain. I passed the park where families played, where laughter filled the air. A little boy ran past me, chasing a ball, and for a moment, I saw Daniel again. The small version of him, the one who used to look back to make sure I was still watching. And just like back then, I smiled and whispered, "I'm right here." When I got home, I made myself tea, sat by the window, and watched the sky. The light was soft, not bright, not dim, just gentle. It reminded me that life doesn't stay the same, but it always finds balance again. I looked at the plant on the table. It had grown taller, reaching toward the sun. And I thought, that's what love does. It reaches. Even in silence, it grows. If you asked me today whether I still wish he had visited every month, I'd probably say no. Because maybe if he had, I never would have learned how to stand on my own again. Maybe I wouldn't have met those children who call me Miss Maggie now, or discovered that I still have so much love left to give. He kept his promise in his own way. Not every month, but when it mattered most. Sometimes at night, I still hear echoes of the past. Laughter in the kitchen, the sound of him running down the stairs, the creak of the front door closing behind him. But they don't haunt me anymore. They remind me that love once lived here, and that's enough. Before bed, I like to sit quietly for a moment, close my eyes, and thank the world for the little things. The peace of an empty house that no longer feels lonely. The warmth of memories that no longer ache. The gentle understanding that people love you in their own time, their own way. Because love doesn't always look like presents. Sometimes it looks like space, the kind that lets both hearts breathe. So when people ask me about my son, I smile and say, he's doing well. So am I, and I mean it. Because after all these years, I've realized something simple and true. We don't lose people when they drift away. We only lose them when we stop loving them. And I never stopped. If you're listening to this and someone you love hasn't called in a while, Don't fill the silence with anger. Fill it with grace. Love them anyway, because one day, when they finally find their way back, whether in person or just in memory, you'll be glad you left the door open.